Community Viewpoint with John Pollock and Maria Hurst.
And welcome once again to another edition of Community Viewpoint. I'm John Pollock, your host for this segment. As you can see next to me, I have Dan Shinhofen, Nye County Commissioner, District 5. Dan represents the southwestern portion of the town and also the county. I happen to be in the same spot. How long have you been in that position?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. And on the center stage here is Dr. Michael Vogel. Dr. Vogel is currently an independent consultant focusing on geotechnical and environmental issues. He's consulted for the Yucca Mountain project, where I initially met you, and he was involved in preparation of technical reviews of licensing documents. He's also providing consulting services for Nye County, where he's involved in scientific program oversight, education, and outreach, and that's why you're here today. Part of your purview is outreach. And let's see, what should we talk about today? How about $5.6 million? What do you think we can do with that, gentlemen?
It's billion.
Billion.
Did I say
billion?
Yeah.
See,
that's even better.
Oh, it's a B, not an M.
That's
so
good.
what can we do with $5.6 billion? Where the heck would we get it?
Well, let's do just a minute or two of background, John,
Okay.
to put it in context. Then we'll talk about where that number came from.
All right.
As you know well, Yucca Mountain was designated to be the site for development of a repository back in 2002. That's still the federal law.
That hasn't gone away.
That's not gone away. Now, we've reviewed the parts of the license application, but the Department of Energy stopped the program sort of in midstream. And it was not stopped by Congress. That's a very important point. It was stopped by individuals who did really not have the authority to stop it, but they were luckily in a position where they could take some actions that resulted in the program being stopped. So there's 3 lawsuits that have been filed relative to the Yucca Mountain project, and that kind of takes us into where we want to go, what this $5.6 billion number came from. One of the lawsuits is filed to try to get the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to restart the review of the license application.
Right.
One of the lawsuits has to do with the federal government continuing to collect money for the disposal of the wastes when they're not working on the waste program. And the third lawsuit has to do with what's called the Waste Confidence Decision, which is what allows this federal government to allow the licensing of nuclear power plants. All those power plants have a condition in their license, if you will, that says they can create nuclear waste because there'll eventually be a repository to dispose of it. So in that morass, President Obama and Senator Reid stopped the program. All these lawsuits are sitting out there. Members of Congress, not necessarily the Senate, but members of Congress are very interested in trying to get the program moving forward again.
Right.
Now, what Mr. Obama and Mr. Reid did, well, the Secretary of Energy principally, Secretary Chu, did was they formed something called the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. And this was supposed to find an alternative for Yucca Mountain. They had 8 recommendations, and there are 3 of them that really mean a lot to us. One of them is that there ought to be a consent-based approach for siting future repository facilities. There should be a new organization. There should be prompt efforts to develop repositories, prompt efforts to develop storage. I think Dan had an observation he wanted to make on the Blue Ribbon Commission report.
Yeah, I have a few. But basically, the Blue Ribbon Commission gave recommendations. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act is a law. Let's start with that. And one of the recommendations that the Blue Ribbon Commission came up with is that significant incentives and benefits should accrue to communities and states willing to host facilities. And it always talks about communities and states. It continues to say, when they talk about we want local, or we want a host state to agree, they say local and state buy-in. And we've shown that there is local buy-in. So these significant incentives now comes to this $5.6 billion, which was mentioned the other day in a hearing that Congressman Shimkus ran. And And why not, if they're going to offer that money for temporary storage sites, why not offer that money to Nevada? Because for years, all we've heard is there is no money, and the state's policy towards Yucca Mountain has been this.
Right, and when you say communities, you're talking for the Nye County, but the town of Pahrump is also taking the same stance also. So we're both on the same page.
As
here.
have counties surrounding Nye County as well.
Yes, that's very important to
It's
realize.
really important to get to the heart of what those resolutions say. They don't say, bring it on, we want it.
No.
They say, we recognize the federal law has designated Nevada for this facility, and if it can be done safely,
Right.
if it can be done safely, we're willing to work with you on benefits and incentives, if you will. But that's the key part of this. Nobody is saying, you know, this was the best idea anybody ever had. They've said, look, the law was passed. Let's find out if it can be done safely before we take the next step.
And that's a real key point. You know, the first month I was in office, wrote a resolution, got it put forward, that said just that. Well, we're not saying give us the waste no matter what, or you can just buy us off.
Right.
What we're asking for is that they follow the law, and the law, after $15 billion in 30 years, it's like running a marathon, a 25-mile marathon. We're at mile 24.9, and there's the finish line, and the promoters come out and go, stop. We're going to move this to another state.
Right.
And we're saying, let's hear the science. If it can be constructed and operated safely, then let's talk about incentives.
Right, you have a Yucca Mountain sitting there. It's been excavated there's a big loop in there. Since I took tours out there, I saw what's there, and all that money has been invested in there, and it's just sitting there doing nothing. And by the way, there is no waste in there.
Thank you for saying that.
Please don't start that, because people say that from time to time.
That money was spent on science.
Yes, and it was good science. And I know that because I worked for the project for almost 5 years, and I saw that, and I gave people literature. I invited them to find a way to stop it. If you can't, just here's some extra literature. But the science
that's a really key point relative to that lawsuit to restart the hearings on reviewing the license application. The lawsuit is asking for what's called a writ of mandamus, and I think you and I may have talked about that before,
right,
which simply means follow the law. Okay? Now, why was the program stopped in the first place? Okay? You can look at this from a lot of different perspectives, but the one I like to look at is the fact that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff was right at the point of releasing what were called safety evaluation reports that would have said, was the Yucca Mountain science good or bad? Now, you've heard from Senator Reed over and over again, the science is bad. The Secretary of Energy once said the science was bad, and he was challenged by Congress, incidentally, to give them some evidence of that, and he couldn't provide it. But the important point is, the NRC staff could not issue their safety evaluation report, but they created something called a technical evaluation report, which is essentially the safety evaluation report without the regulatory conclusions. And you can read those documents, and many people have read them, and they do not have issues with the science that we did at Yucca Mountain. To me, that's very meaningful. We'd like to get that documented, get that formal, but from what we can tell, the NRC staff thought we did a good job on the science.
There were a great deal of scientists, technicians, people like yourself. We've lost most of those. They've moved away, gone on to other places.
Amazingly enough, we have lost the bulk of the people who worked on the program, but the national laboratories have done a very good job of keeping a core scientific staff together, working on different programs, but readily available to come back on a pretty short notice once we get the mandamus ruling to start the license application hearing.
So
again.
That would be like a skeleton crew to get it.
I don't want to call it a skeleton crew. The labs have deliberately identified the people who are most key to answering questions that would come up in the licensing hearings, and they have kept them in positions where if the Congress, the authorization comes to move the program forward, and the lawsuit is resolved in the favor of starting the license application hearings again, we're ready to go.
Oh, that's very good to hear. Yes.
If I could, what we lost was a minimum of 2,000 jobs good, high-paying jobs. Southern Nevada lost these jobs. And in this economy, to throw those jobs away because you have a political viewpoint, I don't know. What really confuses me, and I'm a simple, I'm not a good politician by any means, but if they're convinced that this is a unsafe and it's not workable, then why not hear the science? And that's all we're saying on our side. The people who are for hearing, let's hear the science. So I've over and over, when I've got a chance to speak near Harry Reid and those opposing, is why not come along with us? Let's follow the law. We're a nation of laws. Let's hear the science and put it to bed. If you're convinced it's not going to work, the science should show that.
Yes, it's unfortunate we can't hear that, though, because it would shift the balance in the other direction. We have 3 more minutes to go in this segment. What do we want to bring forward in this segment?
Well, I think if we're going to do another section, I'd like to save the argument about get more specific on the $5.6 billion. Dan did a good job of giving you an oversight of it, and we'll come back and go through it in some more detail. Mm-hmm. Anything specific question you'd like to finish up on?
You said we lost all those people, and I mentioned that many times. The people that would have been working on the project probably would have been living here in our county, where the site is in our town here, Pahrump, where you are a district commissioner.
Right.
Those people would have had a higher income base. They would have something called disposable income.
Oh.
Those people are more apt to do volunteerism,
Yep.
so I wouldn't be looking for begging for volunteers for certain things.
John, there's an interesting twist to this that people often don't. It's not the first thing that pops into your mind, but if you have a certain number of people working in a given economy, there has to be a support infrastructure for that. It ranges from 7-Elevens and gas stations, and usually the multiplier is considered to be around 2 or 3. So if we're talking about resuming the license application and eventually beginning construction of a repository, the commissioners, the Nye County commissioners, even before Dan's time, have historically argued those jobs should be in Nye County. All right, and not only the construction jobs and the engineering jobs. Why shouldn't the people who are working and building the repository, why shouldn't they live in Nye County? It's a it's actually close to 100-mile drive to Yucca Mountain from Las Vegas, whereas it's much closer from different parts of Nye County. And over and above that, if you get that specific group of people working in Nye County, it generates another group of people who support those people.
There you go.
We've used a number of as many 7,000 people, jobs, indirect jobs and direct jobs, because you have to add in the railroad as well, which would have had a lot more people working on it if we built that. So the number we've used historically is close to 7,000 jobs.
Right. We would have more schools, more teachers. It would just keep going domino effect.
Sure.
in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
Yes. So we're just about out of time right now. We'll be coming back for another segment because there's a lot more to talk about in this subject. So we'll see you back in a second segment. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for watching.